welcome in everyone to another edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, as always, Tommy Brzee. It is Monday, December 9th around here, and we have a college football playoff to talk about. We officially have the matchups, we have everything set, and we'll get to those 12 teams here in a second in the first segment. Then we'll get to all the other games that happened this past weekend. We'll get to Georgia, Texas, as well as Oregon, Penn State, two very different but very good games over there in the SEC and Big Ten. Then we'll get to the quote-unquote win-and-go home games. The ACC didn't end up being that, but Clemson, SMU, we'll start with Arizona State, Iowa State, as well as Boise State, UNLV. Want to break those down, and then we'll get to the rest of the Group of 5 championships. Definitely want to break those down for you, as well as Army just absolutely rolling to a 12th win there. Then we have some fun bowl games. All the bowl games came out yesterday. Want to make sure you guys get an outlook on what we have in store for the next month or so. Not all about the playoff this time of year. Obviously, some very fun bowl games to be watching. So before we jump into that, I want to make sure you guys know that we get a lot of questions and comments throughout the show, and the best way for you all to get your question on the screen, we can have fun back and forth here, is to use the super chat. At the bottom of the chat on the Sports Network page, click that $sign, add any question, comment you'd like. It'll pop up on the screen, and we can have fun back and forth here. Definitely want this to be interactive, so utilize that. You can ask any question you have about the playoff, all that type of stuff, and I will be able to answer it very quickly. So let's jump into this thing, because we got a playoff to talk about. After all the talking, after all the craziness around the 12 team, after all the arguing around the 12 team, we officially have a bracket, and we'll start with the rankings just to make things a little bit more streamlined here, and want to just give some love to some teams before we probably stop talking about them, at least for a little bit here. So we'll start with the top 25 here. Memphis and UNLV get the love that they deserve at the bottom of the rankings for this year. Colorado the same. Army jumps up a couple of spots. Would have loved to see them jump up a couple more, if I'm being totally honest. Really impressive performance in the American title, but they're in the top 25 at the end of it. Syracuse and Illinois are two teams that I'm really excited to see what they can do in 2025. I think Fran Brown and Brett Bielema, have done an incredible job around there, and I do think it's going to be really fun to watch what this program can do going forward. Both those programs can do going forward, particularly Syracuse. Cannot wait to see what Fran Brown has next up there. Then you do have Missouri. I'm just going to leave them alone for the time being. Iowa State falls a touch. BYU jumps over them. I tend to agree with that. I think BYU probably deserved a little bit more love than they got in the CFP conversations. And then you have all the teams that were kind of stacked there. You have Clemson. We'll talk about them here in a second. And then you have the three teams that were very upset last weekend. They're very upset this weekend. Nothing has really changed, but at the end of the day, now we got the top 12 to talk about. So Arizona State jumps into the top 12. They obviously jump into the field, and we'll break that down here in a second, get into more detail there. Then you do have Alabama. They were the first team out. They're the number 11 team in the country. We'll talk about some of the problems with the format tomorrow. That's one of my big-time problems with this. But SMU, they're at 10. They're in the field. Boise State jumps up to 9. They're firmly in. Indiana, Tennessee, Ohio State, they were hanging out this past weekend. They are firmly in that field, as well as Notre Dame. And then Penn State, you fall just as Notre Dame, Penn State, and Texas all slot down one spot. Georgia jumps up to 2. Oregon stays at number 1. That's pretty much the way that I would have it. I think there's a lot of different ers and ahs here, and more than anything, I have a problem with the format. We will get to that tomorrow, I can promise you that. But let's get to this bracket, because it's a really fun one. Regardless of what you think about this format, frankly, I have not been a Big 12-team playoff person. I think about 6 or 8 teams is probably the right number. I don't think we need any auto bids. I definitely don't think we need any auto buys, and that's something that we'll definitely talk about tomorrow. But overall, when I woke up yesterday, I was very excited. I definitely felt like Christmas morning, definitely wanted to see what the matchups were going to be, see what they were going to do with SMU, with Alabama, with Clemson. Definitely a lot of different things going into yesterday, so I got excited. I won't lie to you. It was definitely really fun to see all this kind of play out, and we got some great matchups. In the first round, I think we have some fantastic matchups where we'll start with Ohio State, Tennessee, two of the most classic programs in college football history, two programs that are really, really fun to watch, no doubt about that. You have Ohio State coming off the loss to Michigan. We'll see if they can mentally bounce back from that. We'll probably get into these games in a little bit more detail tomorrow, talk about some of the different matchups and things. Obviously, I'll give my full prediction tomorrow. Won't give my I'll talk about it a little bit more tomorrow. We'll get into that a little bit later. But obviously that Ohio State-Tennessee game was one that we felt like we knew was coming, and that one will be played on December 21st at 8 p.m., so something to watch out for there. Will be an incredibly fun game, and seems to be kind of the marquee one of the bunch. That being said, we have three more great ones. We have the battle for the orange. We have Texas against Clemson. Obviously, Tennessee gets a little bit left out of the fun there, but at the end of the day, going to be a really fun one in Austin, and there's a lot of subplots spots in this one. You have multiple teammates on either sides of the field. Cade Klubnik played against Quinn Ewers in a state championship back in the day. So there's a lot of juice in this one. Cannot wait to see what Cade Klubnik can do going back to his home state, back to his home city in Austin. So that'll be really fun. And then you have Penn State SMU. This is a really interesting game in so many different ways. It's kind of the out of left field matchup that a lot of us imagined. When we got into the 12-team playoff, we all wanted to see the weird ones. And I think Texas Clemson follows that. I don't think they've ever faced each other, actually. And then Penn State SMU would absolutely fall into that. And then you got the battle for Indiana. This is one that I really wanted to happen one way or the other. I kind of wanted the results to let this happen because I cannot wait for this one. It's going to mean a lot to the people in that state. It's going to mean a lot to the kids at Indiana that didn't get recruited by Notre Dame because that's obviously going to be a dynamic here. So a lot of really, really fun matchups here. You can't get enough of all the juice here. And in terms of the scheduling, just so everyone's on the same page for the first round of scheduling, Notre Dame, Indiana will be that Friday night game on December 20th. They'll play at 8 p.m. And then you do have the noon game. It'll be Penn State. I'm very sorry, Nittany Lion fans. They did give you another noon game. They just decided to twist the knife a little bit on you there. But Penn State SMU will be that noon game on that Saturday. They'll follow up. It'll be Texas Clemson at 4 p.m. in Austin, Texas. And then you'll get to Columbus, Ohio. You'll get to Ohio State, Tennessee. Probably the best game of the bunch. It's going to get the marquee slot. So cannot wait for this one. I mean, when you talk about this playoff, obviously it's not my favorite format. I will go into that in great degree tomorrow. So I don't need to waste your time with that right now. But it's going to be really fun to watch this unfold. There's no doubt about that. There are some teams that get some very nice paths, including Penn State and Texas seem to have the nicest path, although I don't know if those Texas defenders want to be tackling Cam Scadaboo right about now. But a lot of different things to really enjoy about this one. I think when you look at this 12 team, you got 6 teams that are making their CFP debut between Tennessee, let's see if I can get this, Tennessee, Arizona State, Boise State, Indiana, Penn State, and SMU. All of those teams making their debut in the CFP. 5 teams looking for their first national title, including the number 1 team in the country. Oregon's still looking for that first national title, and it will be very, very cool to see if they can pull that off throughout this next little month, and it's going to be awesome. It's going to be really cool to watch this unfold. Obviously, I got some issues with the formatting. Boise State, I don't think should have a bye here. I don't think they're one of the 12 best teams here. All that being said, they had a really great season. They played Oregon very close. They took care of business the rest of the way. They played a great game on Friday, so I'm not here to, bash them right about now. I would have had them ranked differently throughout the year, but the way they had them ranked last week makes total sense that they're at 3. Arizona State slots up to 4, which I was a little bit worried that Clemson might jump them and slot into that 4 position, but seems like I think they probably made the right decision there. I don't think Clemson probably deserved a bye in this one. I think they probably deserved maybe the 11, maybe the 12. I thought there was a possibility that they would slot them above SMU and have them going to Penn State, but as of right now, I think this makes total sense. It's roughly the way that I would have it. I definitely will break down my rankings of these teams, just the way that I see them, face value, not necessarily seeding. I'll break down some of the issues I have with it. I'll break down my entire picks for the CFP tomorrow. So a lot of different things coming of this, but as we get into this, I think we'll see those first round matchups, and those will probably be, at least for me, probably the highlight of this thing, just because you have the home atmospheres, you have on-campus atmospheres, and you have a lot of juice, and you have a lot of weird matchups all around this thing, particularly Texas Clemson and Penn State SMU, but then you have a couple other things that just cannot wait to see down the road. You could get an Ohio State-Oregon rematch in the second round, which would be absolutely incredible. I think that Texas front against Cam Scadaboo would be about as fun of a matchup as we've seen all year, and then maybe Clemson can pull the upset. I've seen a lot of people start to lean in that direction, saying this Clemson D-line can really get after you. If that Texas O-line struggles the way they did this past weekend, it could get really interesting over there. So definitely one to watch there over in Austin. I would lean towards Texas as of right now. Obviously, I'll release my predictions tomorrow, but that's one that you're definitely going to want to watch. And then for Penn State SMU, the big question I have for Penn State coming out of yesterday was, can they stop explosive plays? Can they slow down those big-time, fast-moving, intense offenses? Because that's exactly what SMU is. I'm not necessarily saying that SMU can handle the physicality of what Penn State has, but they can make a lot of plays, and they can make Penn State try to keep up with them, and then maybe it ends up a little bit like what the Big Ten championship was against Oregon, which we will talk about next segment. For Notre Dame, Indiana, I think it's all about just kind of 2 teams that not a lot of people believe in, to be totally honest with you. I think people still believe that Notre Dame is a team that I believe paper tiger is a way people describe it, where you haven't necessarily played a big time talent. When you have played the elite teams on your schedule, or excuse me, when you have played, really great teams, you've played well from time to time. Indiana, you obviously had that game against Ohio State, did not play very well. For Notre Dame, they have the terrible loss to NIU. A lot of different things around that matchup where there's not going to be a lot of people that are picking these two to win the national title. And we'll see if one of these teams can send a big-time message in that game and then move on to a game against Georgia that would be very interesting. You have Notre Dame possibly facing off against Georgia. That would be a little bit of a rematch of a really good home-and-home they had back in the day. And then Indiana UGA would just be a really interesting one that I don't think any of us expected to see going into the season, but that's the 12-team playoff. I think Penn State is just hoping that they get through that first matchup, and then they'll probably be more than 14-point favorites against Boise State. Just got to slow down number 2, which is easier said than done. But it's going to be really fun to watch all of this unfold. I think for me, obviously, the format is still something I absolutely hate. We'll probably have to swallow that pill for one more year until we are able to fully figure this thing out. But at the end of the day, we're in bowl season. We're in a CFP season for the very first time. We're in a season that's a little bit different. You're going to have home playoff games. You're going to have a lot of really fun matchups throughout this thing. You're going to have weird matchups, and you're probably going to have an upset or two. And we'll try to figure it out, and I'll try to give it into my predictions tomorrow to see if I can get this thing fully right. But a lot of different things going into this, and I can't wait for it. I think it's going to be really, really fun. Obviously, not my favorite way to do this thing, but at the end of the day, I'm going to be on my couch watching this the same as you guys. So really enjoyed, obviously, seeing all this unfold, and I'm sure craziness will continue to follow us into the CFP. So we'll see what happens there. We'll obviously break down my picks and previews and all of that stuff tomorrow in more depth and really throughout the next 2 weeks. But let's take our first break here, and when we come back, we'll talk about the top 5 battles that we saw this past weekend. SEC and Big Ten were decided, and a lot of really fun stuff to talk about. 2 very different games to talk about right after this, so stick with us.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, I'm losing shit. A stupid myth, you choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about the CFP field. Looks like a very, very fun 12-team playoff. Obviously, I got my issues. We'll talk about those tomorrow, but let's talk about the championship games. Let's get into all the games that happened this past weekend, and we'll start over there in Atlanta, Georgia, actually where I am right now in Atlanta, Georgia, and we'll break down the SEC championship. Georgia gets it done over Texas for a second time this year in overtime. It was very different than the first time around, but kind of similar in some different ways. You had Gunnar Stockton come into the game after Carson Beck got injured. Does not look good. I'll leave it at that for the time being. I do not know the injury, but it looks like from everything that I've seen, it could be a UCL. If it is a UCL, he will not be back this year. I can say that very confidently. We'll see what happens. Obviously, we will update you as it does. Does not look good for Carson Beck in the playoff, possibly. But very weird game. Texas dominated the first half of this game. It was outgaining them, I believe, 260-ish to about 56 at halftime. The score was 6-3. So Texas left a lot on the table in the first half, and it was kind of emblematic of what their season has been. There's been a lot of really, really good offense played, and then you get down into the red area, you get down into the 30-yard line and closer, you really start to struggle. And some of that is Quinn Ewers, some of that is the run game not being quite as good as it needs to be, some of that is a lot of the offensive line play not being as good as it needs to be. So there's a lot of different questions around that offense right about now, and I think you got to ask the question over the next couple of weeks is, how do we want to handle this quarterback situation? I tend to believe that the best way to do it is Quinn Ewers is your starter. He's the guy that runs the offense the majority of the time, but you got to give Arch more snaps. He can't just get in there for the 3rd and 2 or the 4th and 2 when you really need 2 yards. He's got to be in there a little bit more often, especially in the red zone, because that helps your run game. And then you got to give the semblance that he's going to pass the ball. You have to give the worry for the defense that he's going to pass the ball, because at some point when they see number 16 trot on the field, they're saying, okay, let's pack it in. Let's make sure we're ready for a run. So a lot of different things that need to happen over the next couple of weeks around that quarterback situation. The poorness of Quinn Ewers' performance is getting majorly overblown. Threw for over 350 yards, made a couple of mistakes here and there. The offensive line didn't play well. The run game really let him down. So I'm not here to bash Quinn Ewers by any means. I am here to say they probably got to get Arch a little bit more involved, especially in the red zone, if they want to be fully successful as an offense. But getting to Gunnar Stockton, because that was the story of this game. This guy coming in, getting absolutely laying out late in this game, but holding on to the ball in overtime and giving Georgia a chance to win. If he lets go of that ball when Andrew Makuba hits him, that game's over. There's no doubt about that. And speaking of that hit, just for a second, because there's a lot of people online being very mad about that hit, because it was vicious. There's no two ways about that. It was a very aggressive hit from Andrew Makuba. The thing is, by rule, that's not targeting, and I'm not saying that it shouldn't be. The reality is, if that shot right there, if by rule that is not targeting, which it is, the way he explained it, it is not targeting by rule, it is as good a proof as I've ever seen that targeting is not there to really protect the players, or isn't doing good enough to protect the players, because if it was, then Andrew Makuba would be out of that game, period, end of story. So it wasn't targeting. By the letter of the law, it was not targeting. Man, if that's not targeting, then we're just not protecting players by implementing targeting. So a lot of different questions around that. Obviously, Andrew Makuba is fine. He is going to play in the playoff game, no problem there. Gunnar Stockton got up. He is more than fine. I think he will be fine going forward. Probably has a pretty good concussion right about now. He's got multiple weeks to get right, get into practice, and get ready. So he will be more than fine. For Carson Beck, it was really tough that he went down, but everyone else stepped up. When Gunnar Stockton came in the game, and really at halftime, it felt like this entire team felt that we have to all step up more. We all have to put Gunnar Stockton in better situations. So the offensive line got more push. There were very few drops from the wide receivers, maybe 0 in the second half. The defense played a ton better, especially that defensive line. So overall, you had a lot of really good things happen that just kind of helped Gunnar Stockton be the story of this game. You know, help Gunnar Stockton execute this offense really efficiently, go down and score on his very first drive. It sputtered at times. He threw the pick that probably should have been a pick 6 if Jalen Gilbo had his head turned around, but overall, a lot of different things went on in this game. More than anything, Texas gave this one away in a lot of different ways. You had 11 penalties for 94 yards, 2 missed field goals, 2 turnovers, terrible in the red zone. That's what lost you this game, plain and period. You know, this is a game that 10 times out of 10, Texas would tell you they should win. But you leave that much on the table, you make that many mistakes, you give Georgia that many opportunities, they are going to beat you. There's no doubt about that. Georgia is too tough of a team. They're too well coached. They have too much of that championship DNA. You're not going to be able to get it done. I'm just being totally honest with you. And we will explore more of that Texas quarterback situation probably throughout the week a little bit later. Just talk about the way that I look at it. I've talked about it. I think it's Quinn Ewers leading the way. I think it is Arch Manning a little bit more often than they have been using him now. And I think Sark believes the same thing. He said as much in his post-game interview. So we'll see what happens there. Obviously, a lot of things to come from this, but how Georgia got this done. They controlled the line of scrimmage again. You know, in the first matchup, we felt like this Texas O-line is going to have to play a whole lot better. Kelvin Banks did not go in this game, so that definitely did play a factor, but 6 sacks, 15 tackles for loss. They were all over the place, and those screen passes that Texas loves to use were just getting blown up, and they were making incredible tackles in open space, and that's what Georgia does. If you can do that against Texas, then you're going to be in really good shape. Not a lot of teams can, but Georgia definitely can. And then Texas helping them out. We talked about it, 11 penalties, 2 missed field goals, poor red zone execution. That lost this game for Texas. There's no two ways about that. Obviously, Georgia played a great game and battled back, but there's a lot of different things that Texas did that if they do one of those things differently, they probably come out on the right side of this one. And then the resilience of Georgia is incredible. This team went through the toughest schedule in the country, went on the road 3 different times to 3 top 10, top 5 opponents throughout the year, hosted Tennessee at home, played Clemson to start the year, and their SEC championships. Or they're SEC champions. They're 11-2. They're a remarkable team, and it's what Kirby Smart has built around there. It's no longer about, they have to have the best athletes. They have to have the best defense. They have to have Stetson Bennett making all the plays in the world. They have to have A.D. Mitchell on the outside going up and making a huge play. It doesn't have to be that anymore. It just has to be them in a game, late in the game, and then they're going to make you pay. That's just what they do. That's what Georgia is. That's what Kirby Smart has built, and that's what championship DNA is all about. So Carson Beck went out in this game. Gunnar Stockton is likely going to be the starter throughout the playoff. I don't think there are a lot of people that are all that worried about Georgia going into the playoff, even with Gunnar Stockton, because they understand what this program is. Everyone stepped up in the second half of that game. I can't imagine it's going to be any different in the playoff. So it'll be fun to watch the rest of the way. Where they do go from here is the playoff for both these people. Texas is back to work, and this team can win a national title. Changes need to be made on the offensive side of the ball. I don't think an outright quarterback change, but playing around with that quarterback position a little bit more is definitely something that you're going to want to do. We'll probably get into the Ewers Manning conundrum probably Wednesday, if I had to imagine. I'll let you know on that a little bit later. And then Georgia. Complicated question. This is one of those things where you won the SEC, you're 2 seed in the CFP, and you probably don't have Carson Beck the rest of the way. So there's a lot of questions. You have good news because Gunnar Stockton is a very good player and will be ready to go, and you have plenty of time to get him ready to go. But at the end of the day, it's definitely not the perfect scenario for Georgia. If they won this game and Carson Beck was healthy, there you go. That's absolutely perfect. But now you add a little bit of wrench into the works as Georgia heads into the playoff, but you got the win here. No reason to believe you can't beat a couple other playoff teams. And then moving forward, we do have Penn State, Oregon. This one was awesome. It was not a Big Ten championship. I know the logo was in the middle of the field. I know they were playing in Indianapolis, but this was not a Big Ten championship score. It was 45-37 Oregon, and Oregon kind of just put on a show. Penn State actually went for over 500 yards, 300 on the ground. Oregon almost get to 500 yards, and Tez Johnson might have just had a game of the year. He was absolutely incredible all over the place. I believe had 181 yards and a touchdown. Ridiculous how good that kid is, and when you put him in open space, a lot of really special things can happen. The Penn State running back duo, we talked about a lot going in. They were that as special as I expected them to be. 14 carries, 124 yards, and a score for Katron Allen. Nick Singleton, 10 carries, 105 rushing yards, 43 receiving yards, and a score receiving. Remarkable stuff from this running back duo, and it shows you just how good this offense can be when those guys get rolling. When those guys are running downhill, when they are really imposing their will, not a lot of teams that can really stop this Penn State offense, especially when Drew Allar's playing at that level. Obviously, he made his couple of mistakes. Those were kind of the difference in the game in a lot of different ways, but he's a remarkable player. Both these quarterbacks played incredible football. Dillon Gabriel a little bit more cleaner. Drew Allar made that incredible touchdown pass that made you think Penn State might have had a shot late in this game, but overall, I think it was one of those things that shows you just how good both these quarterbacks are. I think Drew Allar is one of those guys that if he comes back for 2026, or 2025, I tend to expect him to, he could be a first-round draft pick. He is that good. He has all the tools that you could possibly want him to have, and he played an incredible game. Their defense has problems, and we'll get to that throughout the week. We'll talk about that as they get towards SMU, which is a very explosive, very fast offense. So a lot of things to talk about. But for Oregon, you win the Big Ten in year one. 12-0 turns to 13-0, and now your season starts back over. We talked about it last week. It's now just about winning a national title, and you got to compete with the best teams in the country. Your defense has a lot to figure out. There's no doubt about that, and we'll talk about that Oregon path. We'll talk about that Penn State path later, or probably tomorrow, because that's one of the other flaws with this system that Penn State lost, and probably in better shape than the Ducks when you talk about the CFP. But keys to the game for Oregon were execution from Dillon Gabriel was perfect. There's really no two ways about that. He might be the very perfect quarterback for this offense. Makes very, very few mistakes. Always executes the pass where it needs to go. 22 for 32, 300 total yards in this game. 4 touchdowns. Really remarkable stuff from Dillon Gabriel in this game. He was absolutely incredible and definitely one of those guys that really just executes an offense that has all of the guys around him. You know, when you talk about the Oregon offense or even the Texas offense, we talked about that going into the year. It was going to come down to Quinn Ewers just executing the offense in front of them, that offensive line holding up for him, and that run game getting going. Oregon's been able to do all that, and you see what that offense can be. I think it's the same thing with Texas. They're just missing the mark in the run game and the offensive line and somewhat in what Quinn Ewers can do on the field. So a lot of different similarities from Oregon to Texas. Oregon just hit that different level on offense. But they also took advantage of all the opportunities that Penn State gave them because the defense really struggled for the vast majority of this game. They were able to get an INT early to kind of put them up by about 18. They were able to get an INT late to put this game on ice, and Penn State did miss a field goal early in the second half. They go right down the field, go up 14, never give the lead back. So a lot of different small openings that Penn State gave throughout this game. Oregon took all of them, and that's what a championship team does. And then mismatches on the outside. Tez Johnson was a nightmare for these DBs all night. Whether it was A.J. Harris or Jalen Kimber or whoever you wanted to put on him. If it was three guys you wanted to put on him, he was all over the place. He had 181 yards, one score. He was a nightmare. And then the tight ends, Keon Sadiq, you had Terrence Ferguson, stepped up in big-time ways and were really, really dangerous in that passing attack. And really, when you talk about a guy like Tez Johnson, you just need supplemental pieces. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to game changers all over the field. If you have number 15, you just need guys to pick up the slack here and there. So that's exactly what happened in this game, and Dylan Gabriel executed the offense at a ridiculously elite level on Saturday. But where they go from here, Penn State, you take a loss and you're in a really good spot, and that's another issue with this playoff. But at the end of the day, you're going to a CFP game at home against SMU. Then you're staring down Boise State, the other chance, and we'll see what happens to very elite rush offenses, and definitely something that Penn State has done really well with throughout the year. Kind of struggled with in this game. So a lot of stuff to talk about with that matchup. We will get into it throughout the next couple of weeks. And then Oregon, you're right exactly where you wanted to be, where you expected to be. You're winning the Big Ten. You were the number one team in the country. You were going to be the team to beat as we head into the CFP. It'll be interesting to see what happens there. Definitely a lot of different questions about this Oregon team, especially that defense. We'll talk about them leading into this CFP, and we'll talk about what they would do against an Ohio State again or against a Tennessee if they were to face them. So a remarkable couple of matchups here. This is obviously the ones that everyone was looking towards for the elite football of the weekend. Georgia, Texas was a little bit more sloppy than I think a lot of people were expecting, but at the end of the day, two really fun games. And now we'll take our second break, and then we'll get into the quote-unquote win-and-go-home games. That ACC game didn't end up being one, but it really did feel like one. Then you had Arizona State and Boise State just kind of roll over their opponents this past weekend. We'll talk about it all right after this, so stick with us.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about the two huge games in the SEC and the Big Ten. Obviously, all four of those teams are in. Those two teams that lost might be in a little bit better shape than the teams that won, and we'll talk about that tomorrow. But let's get into the quote-unquote win-and-go-home games. At least it felt like that going into the day. It obviously wasn't that coming out of the day. And we'll start with the one that didn't end up being a win-and-go-home game, that ACC championship. What a game. An absolute remarkable finish over there in Charlotte. SMU was down 17 heading into the fourth quarter. They grind their way back, tie the game with 16 seconds left. Clemson gets the longest kick return they've had all year from Adam Randall for 41 yards, and they hit a 56-yarder for the win. Insane. It was absolutely remarkable. It was one of those games that you want to have in this type of format, especially when both teams don't know what their fate holds. I mean, Clemson would know one way or the other. For SMU, they did not know if this knocked them out or it kept them in. Definitely was one of those things where you saw it go through the uprights and you felt like SMU had done enough, but you weren't quite sure. It was definitely one of those worries that a lot of people have as we get into the CFP format. But definitely a remarkable game. Obviously, in my opinion, SMU did plenty to prove that they belong in the field. Obviously, there's plenty of arguments around the way, and we'll talk about that tomorrow. But this was about as good as I possibly could have hoped, if I'm being totally honest. I'm a little bit worried about SMU a little bit in the second half, or early in the second half, because it did feel like Clemson's athletes were just a little bit too much for SMU early in this game, and I was worried that was going to tumble, and then I was going to have to sit on here and say, SMU probably didn't belong in the playoff, but they definitely did. They played an incredible game, really battled back, and the start of this game was ridiculous. We had 28 points scored, 1 punt, 2 turnovers from SMU, 2 missed field goals. It was all over the place. The bounces kept going Clemson's direction, but it was all over the place, and Clemson took full advantage of the couple of mistakes that SMU did make. But in the early stretch, you had Bryant Wesco making play after play for Clemson, and the Clemson offense is kind of just the Clemson offense at this point. If they're not hitting deep balls down the field, it gets a little bit stagnant. It gets a little bit bogged down. So definitely something to watch as they head to Austin against one of the best, maybe the best defense in the country. They got to make sure that they can either find those explosives or find the down-to-down success that they're going to very much going to need. But Brian Wesco is going to be huge for finding those explosives. Had a 35 and 43-yard touchdown scores. Remarkable player, and definitely a guy that throughout his freshman year has developed into an absolute stud. In 2025, he might be one of the best, maybe the best wide receiver in the entire ACC. But it's hard to walk away from this game not being impressed with both teams. I think Clemson is one of those teams that I wouldn't have had in, even if they won this game. You know, in my perfect format, they probably wouldn't be in the playoff right now. But at the end of the day, they took their chance. They took the chance that Miami gave them last week. They took it and ran with it. They played an incredible game. SMU battled back, made it really, really interesting, a really remarkable finish. It was exactly what you kind of wanted that out of this game. Out of a game that SMU did not know what their fate was. Neither team really knew what this game held. It was a lot of juice in that building. There's no doubt about that. But where these teams go from here, you're both in the playoffs. So for SMU, you're off to Happy Valley. And this is going to be a really interesting game as far as I see it, because this offense for SMU, not necessarily similar in the way they go about business to Oregon, a lot of the same athletes, a lot of the same explosivity, a lot of the same ability, and you got a quarterback that can really scoot in Kevin Jennings. So that's going to be a really fun game. Cannot wait to break that one down in a little bit more detail. We'll do kind of just a quick look at all the first round games tomorrow. I'll give my predictions tomorrow, a lot of different stuff coming on that. And then for Clemson, you got the chance. You had the chance in front of you, and you took it. Now you're in the dance, and you're just waiting for the possible winner of that you were heading to Texas. You were heading to Austin, Texas, hoping you can kind of spoil some of the fun and get a lot of the really fun storylines going in. Take advantage of that. Let Cade Klubnik go back into his hometown and really go at the Longhorns. So it will be a really, really fun matchup there. Cannot wait to see what these two teams do. Really excited about that SMU-Penn State matchup. Clemson definitely looking for an upset where no one believes they're going to get it probably. And then Iowa State, Arizona State, this was a beating pretty much from the jump. There was a moment where it felt like we might have a little bit of a shootout there, and then Cam Scadaboo just kept running. He just kept taking over this game, just kept going to work, and had 16 carries, 170 yards, 2 scores, had most of that in the first half, frankly, and then just for fun, added 2 catches, 38 yards, and a score. This kid is remarkable. Frankly, if they sent him to New York City for that Heisman ceremony, you would have no problem from me. You would have no quarrel. I would be very, very happy to see this guy in New York City get the respect that he deserves, because he's been remarkable this year. He's been absolutely incredible. We knew he was going to be a big part of this game going in. Iowa State had absolutely no answer for number 4. But this game was nearing halftime, and it felt like it was going to be a really fun one. You know, Arizona State was only up by 7 points. Iowa State had the ball. And then kind of disaster truck. They gave away the ball. Arizona State scores before halftime. And then to start the half, there is 6 possessions. It goes Iowa State turnover, Arizona State touchdown, Iowa State turnover, Arizona State touchdown, Iowa State turnover, Arizona State touchdown. That was the game. It ended very, very quickly in the second half, and a lot of people probably took a little bit of a break before the SEC championship at the end of this one, because it was really, really bad. And let's just be totally honest. Iowa State did not have an answer in the second half, and Arizona State took full advantage. And the really remarkable thing from Arizona State, really all year, but especially in this game, was the play calling and the aggression of Kenny Dillingham throughout this one. We saw the 4th and 1 play where they throw deep, get down to the goal line with Stovall, a ton of big-time plays, but overall, even late in this game, when they really needed touchdowns, when they really needed to make plays early in the second half, he had full trust in these wide receivers that were having to take over for Jordan Tyson, the most important player, maybe right behind Cam Scadaboo, on that team. Had over 1,100 yards going into this game. Obviously has to sit out the rest of the year, but Stovall went for 91 on 4 catches. Malik McClain made a ridiculous play kind of out of thin air. Didn't even realize he was going to get run in this game. Xavier Guillory made 2 touchdown catches, including one that I still can't figure out how he was able to make that catch, but remarkable stuff from these wide receiver group that knew they had to step up. They did and then some. So you're going to need that going into the CFP. You're going to be playing a team, whether it's Texas, whether it's Clemson, they're going to be able to guard you. They're going to be able to physically be a little bit more up to the challenge in the run game than Iowa State was. Those wide receivers are going to have to step up big time once you get into the CFP. But this Arizona State team is dangerous. There's no doubt about that. When you have number 4 on your team, when you have Cam Scatterbo, you're going to be able to win a lot of games. Just the reality of the situation. He can run through people. It does not matter how much bigger they are than him. There's not a lot of guys that are bigger than him, to be fair. But overall, obviously Texas and Clemson will be more equipped to stop him. I don't know if anyone's fully equipped to stop Cam Scatterbo. So it'll be awesome to see what this team can do in a couple of weeks. Obviously, we got to wait a little bit, no doubt about that, but cannot wait to see what they can do against either Texas or Clemson when they finally face off. And for Iowa State, where do you go from here? I think there's a lot of questions because the big one is, what's Matt Campbell's future around there? There's a lot of talk about him around the UNC job. We'll talk about coaching carousel and some stuff that happened this weekend on tomorrow's show, but overall, you're facing Miami in a bowl game. Could be a lot of questions by the time you get there. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. It'll definitely be an interesting storyline to follow, and you guys will get the updates as we do. But for Arizona State, it was incredible to watch. It was really awesome. It was a team that knew that they were without one of their best players, that knew that they had to win this game to get to the CFP, and they showed up with their hair on fire. It was absolutely awesome to watch, and now it's just about proving the world wrong and beating Clemson or Texas when you play them in a couple of weeks here, I think on New Year's Day, if I'm not mistaken. UNLV Boise State, another one that got a little bit aggressive, if I'm being totally honest. Boise State controlled this game for the vast majority of it, and while Ashton Jeanty went for 32 carries, 209 yards, and a score, he's absolutely remarkable. There's no doubt about that. This defense was incredible. They were all over the place. UNLV actually got to 217 rushing yards on the day. Thing is, 148 of that came on 3 carries. So on 32 carries, they went for 2.2 yards per carry. So it was really domination from this Boise State defense. They had a couple of lapses, they had a couple of misses, but overall, they did an incredible job against a run game that is incredibly hard to corral. They were able to do that for the vast majority of this game. But overall, for the Boise State offense, Maddox Madsen really stepped up in this one. There were times when he needed to make a big-time throw, made an incredible one to Latrell Caples for a touchdown, but the execution was really great. He just kind of found the open receiver, found Matt Lauder a lot, the tight end, and just kind of made the play right in front of him. Then let number 2 do his thing. That's what this Boise State offense is. Obviously, I think that Penn State or SMU matchup is going to be really tough, but as of right now, they are firmly in the field and they're in really good business, and this game came down to the margins, as it was going to, as it did last time. It was going to come down to that again, and Boise State won them all pretty much. 6 for 14 on third down compared to 5 for 16 for UNLV, over 50% completion percentage, 1 penalty compared to 5 for UNLV, and they won the turnover battle. That's how you win football games, especially at a championship level. You win those margins, and Boise State did exactly that. So this Boise State team, you guys have followed me. It's been a little bit hard for me to fully buy into this team. I've been a little bit worried about Ashton Jeanty's health. I've been a little bit worried about this defense's ability to hold up against some of the elite teams in the country. We'll get to find out. That's the good news about this. We'll get to find out here in a couple of weeks, whether it's Penn State or SMU. We'll find out just how real this Boise State team is. Maybe they're more real than I and a lot of people are giving them credit for. But where they go from here, for UNLV, a lot of things are going to change around there. There's no doubt about that. Barry Odom has already taken the job over there at Purdue, and we'll talk about that tomorrow in more details. I assume plenty of players and possibly coaches will go with him. Brennan Marion is one to watch, whether he goes with Barry Odom to Purdue or he goes somewhere else to be an OC. I've seen Oklahoma State a couple of times, so something to watch there. I still think this is a program that's scaling, but they're going to have to make the right hire here in a second. They got Cal in a couple of weeks, and we'll see what happens in that game. And then it's just about preparing for 2025 without Barry Odom. And then for Boise State, you're in the dance. You did the thing that a lot of people were just waiting for you to stumble throughout the year. You never did. You handled your business, only lost by Oregon by 3 points, and now you just move forward, and you got to figure out who you're playing, whether it's Penn State or SMU, and then it's about shocking the world. That's what Boise State is going to try to do in this playoff, and they got about 24 days to figure out how they're going to do that. So it's going to be awesome to watch all of this unfold. Those 3 games were incredible because you knew it was on the line. SMU Clemson was a little bit different, but it definitely did feel like an elimination game when it was happening, so really enjoyed that. Obviously, a new little wrinkle to championship weekend that hadn't been there in the past, at least not a cross-championship weekend, so really fun to watch all of that unfold. But let's take our third break here, and when we come back, let's just talk about all the other Group of 5 champions. I want to make sure I give them their proper love as we head into the postseason, but a lot of really fun games. Army absolutely rolls, and we'll talk about it right after this, so stick with us.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about those 3 winner-go-home games that happened in the ACC, in the Big 12, as well as in the Mountain West. ACC was a little bit different, obviously, at the end of the day, but definitely did feel that way when that game was going on. But let's get into the Group of 5 championships. I want to make sure I break these down because I might not get to talk about these teams quite as much as we had throughout the rest of the year, so I want to make sure I give them love while I can. And Jacksonville State just dominated Western Kentucky on Friday. Really remarkable performance from Jacksonville State here, and Rich Rodriguez, an incredible performance from him, could lead to another bigger job, and we'll talk about that tomorrow. Definitely a lot of teams that are circling him, particularly a former team of his, but a lot of really fun stuff from this game. Trey Harris was the really fun stuff from this game, as well as Tyler Huff. We'll talk about him here in a second. Trey Harris, 27 carries, 201 yards, 3 touchdowns, also had 3 catches and 54 yards receiving. The dude is remarkable. Frankly, he didn't get love for the Doak Walker Award. He probably should at least be in the top 10 there. The kid is absolutely remarkable. A name to watch in the draft. Probably will go in the 4, 5, 6 area if I had to assume. Whoever gets him is getting an absolute dude that can tote the rock as many times as you possibly want. Really like this kid and definitely think he could be a diamond in the rough when we talk about the NFL draft here in a bit. But Jacksonville State, they were flying around on defense as well. 88 yards rushing for Western Kentucky in this game, 6 tackles for loss, 2 forced fumbles, and just a ton of chaos for that Western Kentucky offense. They never really could get anything going. The back-end defense was incredible for Jacksonville State throughout this game. So really remarkable stuff for Jacksonville State, for Rich Rodriguez, for that entire program. Only the second year in the FBS, and they find a way to win the Conference USA. Really incredible stuff, and shows you just how good of a job Rich Rodriguez has done over there. You had Tyler Huff. He actually did play in this game. There was a little bit of worry that he wasn't going to be able to go. He played incredible. 11 for 15, 176 yards, 2 passing touchdowns, 23 carries, 167 yards, and a rushing touchdown. The kid is remarkable, and that duo between him and Trey Stewart is about as good as you're going to find in the Group of 5 level. Was an incredible game, and Jacksonville State is able to avenge that loss that they had last week to Western Kentucky, get the win, and head on with a huge Conference USA championship. For Western Kentucky, under Tyson Helton, they're moving in the right direction. There's no two ways about that. They've done an incredible job the last couple of weeks. Definitely a program that I think you're going to want to watch as we get into realignment again and all that craziness starts to probably kick back up. I think this is a program that could start to kick up the rankings just a little bit more. Really impressive program, and will be really interesting to see what their future holds around there. And then they do have JMU in a bowl game coming up. Going to be really, really fun to see those two teams on the field. Two teams that I really enjoy watching. Two quarterbacks that I really enjoy watching in Caden Velkamp and Alfonso Barnett. And then Jacksonville State, this was awesome. There's no doubt about that. Tons of uncertainty ahead. We'll see if Rich Rod takes another job. I tend to believe he will, but we'll see which job that is, and it'll be really interesting to see all of that unfold. They have a bowl game against Ohio in a couple of weeks, so definitely will be interesting to see who all is there, if Trey Stewart is playing in that game, all of that stuff that we have to worry about with bowl games now. But at the end of the day, you get your conference championship, remarkable stuff by Rich Rodriguez, and he definitely does deserve a big-time job here pretty soon. Tulane and Army. This did not go the way that I thought it was going to go. I'll be totally honest. Not that I didn't think Army didn't have a chance of winning, more just I thought Tulane was going to score more. I thought they had more athletes on the outside to make some big-time plays, but Army was all over everything. They were absolutely remarkable, and Army scored on every single drive except for the ones that ended the half and the game, and then one turnover on downs on Tulane's 4. It was remarkable. It was absolutely incredible from this Army offense. I believe they were the first team ever to have no incompletions, no punt, and no penalties in a game. It was incredible to watch. Now, they only threw 4 passes, I believe. So it wasn't like they had to throw passes. But at the end of the day, really remarkable stuff. Army came out there on a mission, and Jeff Monken gets his guys ready to roll. And man, were they ready to roll in this one. The duo of Kanye Udo and Bryson Daly is as special as we have seen all year. They had 45 carries between them. Kanye Udo getting 20, Bryson Daly getting 25, 284 yards between them. Kanye Udo 158. Bryson Daly, 126. 5 touchdowns between the two. Kanye Udo, 1 touchdown. Bryson Daly, 4. it was insane efficiency. They were all over the place. Kanye Udo had that one big-time breakout run. It was remarkable to watch this Army team go to work whenever you see the triple option working at that level. The prettiest thing in football as far as I'm concerned. But this was a game that Tulane really wanted to win. There's no doubt about that. Army was able to steal it away, and they joined Oregon and Arizona State as the only teams that won their conferences in year one. Really remarkable season from the Black Knights. A lot of people tried to argue for them to be in the CFP field. I didn't fully agree with them, but I loved the fight and cannot wait to see what they can do going into 2025 and even this weekend against Army. But for Tulane, this program is going to be special. I feel very confident in that because the reality is John Summerall just said he's going to stick around. He said he's not pursuing some of those big-time jobs out there. He probably will next cycle around if I had to imagine, but they're staying around for 2024. I would not be surprised at all if this was the CFP team from the G5 next year because this is a really special team with a lot of ability to go out and get some elite transfers. They did lose their quarterback through the transfer portal, Darian Mensah, so something to watch there, but they can definitely backfill that. I promise you that. They get a bowl game against Florida, and we'll talk about that a little bit in a second, but remarkable stuff from Tulane, and they move forward just hoping that they can get that American championship next time around. And then Army. They were one of the most fun teams to watch in the country. There's no doubt about that. It was so much fun to watch. It was so incredible to see this team unfold, and it was awesome to watch Bryson Daly play football this year. Frankly, he was a guy that I was very much pushing to be more in the Heisman conversation about halfway through the year, but at the end of the day, it didn't quite happen. A really remarkable player, though. Cannot wait to see what they can do against Navy this upcoming weekend, obviously. They have a bowl game against Marshall. A lot of questions around what Jeff Monken's going to do going forward. Definitely a lot of jobs that are after that guy, and for good reason. He had this team really rolling in. Cannot wait to see what the future holds for Army as well as Jeff Monken. And then Ohio, Miami of Ohio. Domination. Parker Navarro went to work in this one as well as Anthony Tyus. Navarro was he 10 for 27? I don't think it was that bad. He had 302 total yards, was really, really remarkable. He had 235 through the air, 67 on the ground, 4 touchdowns, 2 apiece on the ground and passing. Anthony Tyus added 151 and a score on the ground. Really remarkable stuff from this Ohio running game. They were all over this team and definitely made life incredibly tough for Miami of Ohio. But this was one of those games that just felt like they really wanted revenge for that first matchup. They came out with their hair on fire. They gave up less than 200 yards to Miami of Ohio. Keon Mosey had 11 carries for only 28 yards, and really hard to do that to Keon Mosey. So really remarkable job from Tom Albin in Ohio. Another name to watch in the coaching circuit if you had to imagine. But really remarkable job from him. Cannot wait to see what this Ohio team can be going forward and what he can do going forward. We'll see if he gets one of those bigger jobs. We'll see if he jumps ship. But at the end of the day, they finish it off with a MAC title and they move forward to a bowl game against Jacksonville State. Like we just talked about, it'll be really interesting to see what happens there. Could be 2 interim coaches around those 2 teams at that point. But where they go from here, I think for Miami of Ohio, you came up just short. There's no doubt about that, but you won 7 straight. Chuck Martin seems to be elevating this team more and more. You got a bowl game against Colorado State coming up. You win that one, you're in really good shape. You put together an awesome season, you get 9 wins, and you definitely continue to build forward towards there in Athens, Ohio. Really, really fun team, and definitely a team that, as long as you keep Chuck Martin involved, you're going to be a really successful program in the MAC, no doubt about it. And then Ohio, excuse me. The program is definitely going to be really interesting to watch. I feel like there's some scalability here. I feel like there's an ability for this program to maybe kind of dominate the MAC for the next couple of years. It'll be interesting to watch what happens, but I feel like a lot of the NIL world that not a lot of these teams are dipping their toe into regardless, feel like Ohio can do that just a little bit more than some of these other teams. But it'll be interesting to see what happens. They do have Jacksonville State on the 20th. We'll see what happens. That's definitely going to be a really interesting thing. And then we'll see what happens with Tom Albin's future. That's going to be the big question around Ohio, and we'll see what happens there. Definitely 2 teams that I cannot wait to see what happens in 2025. Could be 2 new coaches, but we'll see what happens. But for Marshall, Louisiana, Marshall went to work. There's no doubt about that. They absolutely went to work, and Charles Huff is really not going to be extended. As crazy as that is, if you have not heard the story, it sounds like the Marshall athletic department didn't love that he was looking out at some other jobs, including Southern Miss, which seems like where he's going to end up, but obviously we'll update you when that's official. But it sounds like the administration just doesn't really want him back. They're not really pushing all that hard to get him back, and I guess he's fine with that. I guess he'll move forward, and he'll move forward with a Sun Belt title. So really remarkable stuff. Braylon Braxton is the portal hit that came out of this game. He's the quarterback for this team. he was remarkable in this game. He had 18 for 26, 193 yards, 2 scores, along with 66 more rushing. The kid is awesome. He's absolutely incredible to watch, and maybe he's following his coach to Southern Miss. Maybe he's fielding a couple other offers from some bigger schools, but he had a remarkable performance and then was right in the portal, which is kind of the reality of college football right now. And then Jordan Houston was incredible in this game as well, 117 and 1 score on the ground. Really remarkable rushing attack from Marshall in this game. And then for Louisiana, on the other side of the rushing game, nothing going. 27 carries, 57 yards given up from Marshall, and then without Ben Woolridge, they had nothing going. There was no chance this offense had a chance to get into rhythm, and it was really, really tough sledding for the vast majority of this game. But really awesome finish to Marshall's season. Obviously, some crazy stuff going on behind the scenes that will kind of put a damper on this just a little bit, but at the end of the day, you do win the Sun Belt Championship. You got to just hope you hit on the next hire, and it'll be really interesting to watch. I believe they might have someone in waiting there. We'll obviously update you on all of that as it goes through. But with Louisiana, incredible program, definitely one that I'm really interested to watch going forward in the Sun Belt, but you didn't have your starting quarterback, and it really came back to bite you in this one. For Louisiana, where they go from here, I really think this can be a great team next year. I don't know if Ben Woolridge is going to come back or if he's going to move on to another place or to the draft. I don't know. All of this craziness is very hard to get a beat on right about now, but they do have a bowl game against TCU in a couple of weeks. That's what I do know. So it'll be really interesting to see how many players are playing in that game, if Ben Woolridge is back in that game, if Keon Mosey is playing in that game. I think that's a guy to watch for the portal. So definitely a lot of questions around this team, but cannot wait to see what this program is going to be. And frankly, when I look at the Sun Belt right now, you have JMU probably going in the wrong direction. You have App State definitely going in the wrong direction. You have Louisiana definitely trending in the right direction. So came up short on Saturday, but definitely a lot to like about the Raging Cajuns going forward. And then for Marshall, remarkable for everyone involved, because the reality is all of the stuff going on around this program would be really tough to deal with. Charles Huff is out the door, probably here pretty soon. Braylon Braxton is already out the door. A lot of questions going forward for the Herd. Obviously, enjoy this moment. Definitely relish in it. But at the end of the day, a lot of different things are going to happen around there over the offseason. We'll see if they hit the right buttons. They do get Army in a bowl game, so that'll be a fun one to watch, especially with the run games. It'll be interesting to see what Marshall is at that point and what Army is at that point, to be totally honest. But definitely a lot of juice around that one. Huge props to Charles Huff, and now we'll see what happens with that contract negotiation. But really remarkable games in the Group of 5. Obviously won't get quite enough time to talk about these teams going forward with some lesser bowl games that they're playing in, but cannot wait to see what those programs can do going into this offseason, and we'll obviously break them down when big stuff happens throughout the next month, and we'll break down those games when they come up. But let's take our last break here, and let's talk about those bowl games. Let's talk about the big-time ones. We have about 14 for you, so we'll roll through them pretty quickly, but at the end of the day, wanted to get these ones on your radar. We'll talk about it right after this, so stick with us. Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about those Group of 5 matchups that went on this past weekend. Definitely a lot of really fun ones, and it'll be interesting to see what those programs can do going forward with a lot of uncertainty around a lot of them, as there is pretty much every offseason for these group of 5 programs around the transfer portal. But let's get into the bowl games to watch for, because I know the playoff is the most important thing right now. I totally get that. I will definitely be leaning into the playoff for the next couple of weeks, but we got to give some love to bowl games. We can't be letting players think that bowl games aren't important. They are very important. They're another chance to get together with your teammates, to go out there and play for each other. That's an important thing, and I want to make sure I push that as much as possible. So let's talk about some of the great bowl games that we have on deck, and we'll start with the Frisco Bowl between Memphis and West Virginia. To me, this is the start of the bowl season. There is a game between South Alabama and Western Michigan on this Saturday, actually, but that weird Tuesday game is when it really starts for me. That game that you just kind of pops up on your screen, you realize there's college football on, you get really excited. That's when bowl season really starts, in my opinion. So this is the kickoff to bowl season as far as I'm concerned. I am going to be watching South Alabama on Saturday. I promise you that. But at the end of the day, this is when I really think it starts. Neil Brown will not be the coach for West Virginia going into this game. Will be really interesting to see what happens, and be interesting to see if there's a coach in waiting just hanging out in the box. We'll see if it's Rich Rodriguez, and we'll talk about that tomorrow. But the Gasparilla Bowl between Tulane and Florida, I'm really excited for this one. Darian Mensah has jumped in the portal, so it'll be a little bit different on the Tulane side in terms of quarterback. But let's be honest, we're all here to see number two in blue. I didn't realize that was going to rhyme, but more DJ Lagway is what I want. More DJ Lagway in my life is a very, very good thing. He is so much fun to watch. Cannot wait for this one. I think Florida's probably going to roll, but at the end of the day, it's going to be incredible to watch that one unfold, and it sets us up for a great one, Indiana and Notre Dame. It's the start to the kickoff of the playoff. This one would be a nice little appetizer before we get into the craziness that will be the playoff. The Birmingham Bowl is the one that I am most excited for on this slate. I'll be totally honest with you, and it has everything to do with these two offensive coordinators, Tim Beck and Buster Faulkner. It has everything to do with this quarterback matchup right here. Diego Pavia against Haynes King. It might just be the grittiest quarterback matchup I've ever seen, if I'm being totally honest. Both these guys, if I had to describe them in one word, it would be gritty, it would be tough. I'm describing them in multiple words now, but I'm just going to use multiple words. Gritty, tough, resilient. They're so much fun. They're guys that you want to run through a brick wall for. They're guys that will run through a brick wall for you. Cannot wait to see what happens in this one. We'll see what happens with Diego Pavia. Still some questions around his eligibility going forward. We'll see if that has any effect on this game, but cannot wait to see Tim Beck and Buster Faulkner go at it the entire day in offense. The Liberty Bowl against Texas Tech and Arkansas, one of the games that I was able to find a picture for, actually, but really remarkable game that is going to be really fun, and a little bit later in the slate. You get down to all the way down to the 27th of December for this one, but it's a fun little matchup, no doubt about that. Sam Pittman is going to come back for 2025. I tend to believe that's the right decision around Arkansas, especially with some of the openings that you have right now and what it might look like next year. And then for Texas Tech, you have lost Zach Kittley. It'll be interesting to see who's calling plays for that and what happens with that offense moving forward. Definitely a lot of questions around that. Micah Hudson has walked out the door, so it'll be an interesting look into these two programs that definitely want to turn it around in 2025 and be real contenders in both those conferences. The Holiday Bowl against two of my favorite quarterbacks in this entire year, if I'm being totally honest. Kyle McCord has been incredible to watch after leaving Ohio State in not great circumstances by any means. He ended up being the top passer in the FBS. He was absolutely incredible this year. On the other side, you have a John Mateer that is going to run all over you. He's going to cause insane amounts of problems with his legs. The question is, will he be around for this game? He definitely is flirted with the portal. Looks like Oklahoma could be the team to watch there with Ben Arbuckle, the offensive coordinator, going over there to be the OC for Oklahoma. We'll see what happens. Kyle McCord has said he's not sure if he's going to play yet. I really hope both these guys do, because it'll be a really fun matchup where one team is trying to run the ball to death, one team is trying to throw the ball all over the yard. Cannot wait for this one. Just got to hope that those two quarterbacks are there. If they're not, it will be a great look into what 2025 could be for Syracuse and Washington State. Texas A&M USC, one of the more marquee matchups in terms of brand names in this slate, and it is in Las Vegas, so gives a little bit of juice, a little bit of more juice to it. But it's going to be an interesting matchup more than anything else. And I think for USC, you're in a weird position when you're going forward with Lincoln Riley and all the different questions around that program. For A&M, this is kind of a launchpad point. If you were able to roll in there, beat USC by 14, 21 points, really assert your dominance, Marcel Reed has a great day, I think it could be a huge moment as you move forward in 2025. We've seen how these bowl games can really affect a team as they head into the next season with Florida State. got to make sure that you don't let it negatively affect you if you're USC or if you're A&M. Two huge seasons going for them in 2025 and 2 years that I think both of them feel like they have a chance to compete. You got to be able to win this game. You got to be able to show people that you have that scalability as you go into 2025. Obviously, a lot will change around these two programs, but I still think when you talk about these bowl games, they're a little bit more important to the next year than we're realizing right about now. Iowa State, Miami, another really fun one here, and definitely one where I think opt-outs are going to be almost inevitable. And not to say that I think Cam Ward wouldn't play. I'd be a little bit surprised if I'm being totally honest. He is going to be a top 5 pick. He is going to be one of the top quarterbacks off the board. Tend to be the guys that walk out the door. I'm not necessarily saying that would be the wrong decision. Cam Ward is more than welcome to make whatever decision he likes. I would not be against him one way or the other. Would love to see him on the field. I'll put it that way. This would be a really, really fun game. Could get up and down if both these teams are at full strength. I definitely think it'll be an interesting one to watch with Cam Ward obviously on one side, but also Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel on the other side for Iowa State. So it'll be interesting to watch this one unfold over the next little bit, but regardless of what we get, it'll be an interesting look into these programs in 2025 and what Matt Campbell has going. If Matt Campbell is the coach when that thing rolls around, a lot of talk around the UNC job around him, and we'll get into that in more detail tomorrow. BYU Colorado, I know this looks weird, and it is very weird, but at the end of the day, the Alamo Bowl still has a Pac-12 tie-in, and they still have to utilize that. Colorado got that this year, and they have a Big 12 tie-in, so BYU got that. So it's going to be weird. For the next couple of years, it's going to be weird to watch this unfold because you're going to get a lot of conference matchups. I just very much hope that they do one that we didn't see in the regular season, which is exactly what this one is. Cannot wait to see what these two teams are about. Obviously, Shedeur and Travis Hunter will be playing in this game. Dion has made that very clear. I expect Jake Ratzliff to go, so I think we're going to have a fun game. I think we're going to have two teams at relatively full strength, and it's going to be really fun to watch these two teams go at it. Iowa, Missouri, maybe the grossest uniform matchup we will get the entire time. No disrespect to either of the uniforms individually. When they're on the field at the same time, I don't know if I want to see that much yellow. But at the end of the day, it's going to be really fun to watch this one unfold and really confusing to watch this one unfold because there's going to be a few opt-outs on the Missouri side. I mean, Luther Burden has already entered the NFL draft. Don't know if he's opted out of the game. We'll see what happens there. A lot of different people to watch. Caleb Johnson also has declared for the draft. We'll see if they opt out of this game. I would be almost surprised if they didn't, if I'm being totally honest, but really talented guys right behind him. Cannot wait to see what Missouri has below that, especially on defense. Cannot wait to see some of these younger guys like Williams-Nowari step up in these big-time games and kind of get themselves ready for that 2025 season where both these teams very badly want to compete in their conference. We got a rematch here. One that I think they were just waiting. They were hoping that Michigan was going to be able to get into a bowl game because they were probably going to fudge the numbers to make sure that this one happened, and I'm kind of glad they did, if I'm being totally honest. But a rematch of last year's Rose Bowl. This time it's going to be in Tampa. It's going to be the ReliaQuist Bowl, so not quite as much juice, I'll be totally honest, but still going to be a really fun game. Michigan probably riding about as high as really anyone that's not in the playoffs right about now. You have Bryce Underwood. You have a lot of juice going into 2025. This, for me, for Bama, is just a culture check. I think there will be a couple of players that will opt out. I think there will be a couple of players that leave for the portal. There already have been a couple of players that have left for the portal. We'll talk about that tomorrow. But the reality is, this is about what Kalen DeBoer has. This is about this team and how tough they are. If they get beat by Michigan, then I'm officially worried about what 2025 holds for the Crimson Tide. I'm not right now. I would be a little bit worried if they drop this one because I'd be a little bit worried about what happens in that locker room after it. The Sun Bowl between Louisville and West Virginia and Washington is going to be a really, really fun one to get after each other. I think this one I'm watching very closely just because I think there's two teams in 2025 that can make a real run. You have Louisville, who looks like Miller Moss could be their quarterback next year. Tyler Shuck probably going to make his last start in college football, but the reality is I can't wait to see Isaac Brown. I can't wait to see both these freshmen. You have Damon Williams on one side, likely making his second start ever. Tyler Shuck making his last start ever. And then Isaac Brown is going to be so much fun to watch at that running back position, along with Duke Watson, the other freshman. These are two teams that, if they can put together a great performance here, launch themselves into 2025, you could very well see these two teams in the 12-team playoff next year. South Carolina, Illinois, two teams that I absolutely have loved to watch this year. South Carolina a little bit more later in the year. Illinois a little bit more earlier in the year, if I'm being totally honest. But South Carolina is probably the hottest team in the country. Illinois, to me, is probably the most disrespected. I think people still think that is a layup win. That is an easy win for a lot of teams. That was a really impressive win from Penn State. So I'll leave that there. I just wanted to give Illinois a little bit of love there, but it'll be a fun Big Ten SEC matchup. It'll be a fun matchup for a lot of people that like to compare those two conferences, and whoever comes out on top, whether it's valid or not, they will absolutely be talking about it in that respect. And Lenore Sellers is going to play in this game. There's no doubt about that. He obviously can't not play in this game unless they have some type of injury that pops up. But going to be a remarkable thing to just watch him go to work against a back end that's one of the best in the country. And then for Illinois, it'll be interesting to see what the team is. I do think Luke Altmaier will likely play in this game. Probably will be his last college start. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in this one. And I think both these teams have the ability to score in bunches. Could be a really, really fun game, no doubt about it. The Texas Bowl, one of my favorites, is Baylor against LSU, and I think it's going to be a really fun game. I think there's two quarterbacks that really deserve. Garrett Nussmeier gets plenty of love. Sawyer Robertson is really the one that I want to give plenty of love to because he's been one of the best quarterbacks in the Big 12 all year. He took over pretty early on in the year for Daquan Finn and just went to work. It was really remarkable to watch. Incredible player, really good with his legs. And then Garrett Nussmeier, a lot of questions around him going forward. I do think he will return for the 2025 season. If he does do that, if he does announce that before this game, putting up 300 yards and putting on a little bit of a show would not be a bad idea by any means. And then you do have Dave Aranda going up against the team that got him this job in that 2019 season. He was able to jump into that Baylor head coaching job. So a lot of stuff going into this game. Going to be interesting to see what that LSU team looks like after a lot of different transfers and different things. And then what Baylor has after a really remarkable year that they salvaged. Can they keep that thing rolling and get a big win over LSU? And then you do have the Gator Bowl all the way on January 2nd. You have the Gator Bowl against Duke and Ole Miss, and don't have lines for this one, actually, if I'm being totally honest. But Duke is a really, really interesting team. Went 9-3 this year. Played some ugly football at times, but got the wins when they needed them. Malik Murphy played a really, really good first year as a first-year starter. It'll be interesting to see what he can do in 2025. I assume he'll be in a Duke uniform, but in the world of the transfer portal, I don't think we can take anything for granted right now. And then for Ole Miss, it'll just be interesting to see how many guys suit up. I'll be totally honest. I do think that a fair amount of them will. I like to think that Jackson Dart will be out there. I can't promise that. I think there's a lot of players that are looking towards the NFL on this team, and we'll see how many of them stick around. So definitely will be an interesting matchup. Obviously, Manny Diaz trying to finish a remarkable year at Duke, get to that 10th win, and really put a stamp on this program. For Ole Miss, it's just about showing that you have fight. It's just about showing that you're not going to be the Florida State of this year, or Alabama the exact same. So a lot of different talk around this. Obviously, these bowl games have gotten tampered down a little bit. They've been a little bit less important. Guys start to opt out. There's a lot of questions around them. I still love the bowl games. I understand the playoff is where we all watch and where all the juice is. I totally get that. These bowl games are still very important. These kids getting another chance to suit up, to put on that jersey, to go out there with their boys. It's really important. I love them. I cannot wait to watch all of these unfold, and if anything, I will do my darndest to make sure that people understand that bowl games still very much matter in the world of college football. But at the end of the day, that'll do it for this edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It does make a huge difference. Also, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, all the social pages for all the content and updates you could possibly need. We have great people doing great work across every single sport you could want. So I understand CFP is a huge topic of conversation right now, but so is the NFL gearing up for playoffs. So is basketball. So is all of the other stuff going on, and we have it all covered around GSMC. So come on over and we'll have you totally covered. But thank you once again for listening. I will be back tomorrow with my full CFP predictions, with all of my issues for the CFP, with previews of the first round, a lot of different things coming on tomorrow's show. So I'll see you then.
Let's go.